Hey, I'm Scott. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I'm in recovery for sex addiction and compulsive overeating. Hey, glad that I could be here tonight. Tonight is a great lesson. It's about amends. These are the last one I taught on forgiveness is huge, and amends is a tough one. It seems simple. It seems like it's easy, and it should be easy if you do it right. So I don't know what you've been taught. I don't know what you've been guided to do. But I just encourage you tonight, sit back and listen. And this may help you. I've been a sponsor for a few years. And I had, one of my guys is out there. Woo! I've had guys that I've sponsored and they're like, hey, I'm going to go make amends. And I go, hey, hold on, wait, let's talk through this, and let's make sure we're going to do this right. I get a call the next day, hey, I went and made all my amends. And I'm like, what did you do? And he's like, and my wife's really mad at me. I go, oh, we may have done it wrong. So there's some experience, strength, and hope, hopefully tonight, that I will be able to share with you. But tonight is all about amends. I remember, what was it? My daughter's, she 20? 19 still. So 3 years ago, 4 years ago, she was 15 and a half. And I remember taking her out driving for the first time. She had a permit. She was all excited. I was scared to death. And we're driving, and we did okay. I took her all back country roads because less people to run into. And we're driving, and we're coming back from Oakdale into Riverbank, and there's these two things in the middle of the road that are pretty important, and there's two yellow lines. And the key when you're driving is to stay in your lane. It gets dangerous when you start to go outside of that lane. And my daughter, I love her. Sometimes she struggles with some ADHD. I don't know where she gets that. But there'd be times all of a sudden she'd be drifting, and I'm like, you gotta get back in your lane. And she's like, oh, sorry, I was like, you have to pay attention. You're going to die. And I'm in the car, so I'm going to die as well, and that is not good. And then I've been spending time with my 16-year-old right now as we're teaching him to drive. And he does pretty good until we get into neighborhoods. And there's these wonderful things on the side of the road that are called parked cars. I think he's trying to give every mirror a high five with our mirror. And it's like, wow, can you scoot over to the middle this way a little bit? And it gets scary. But the key is that we got to stay in our own lane. And I don't know if you've heard that phrase in recovery, but it is about staying in our own lane. And it is difficult. It is difficult sometimes. I actually this morning was on my way, and I was on Oakdale Avenue, and there's a pretty gnarly car accident on Oakdale today. I was driving, and there was a car that went upside down. And I was like, how ridiculous. Don't you know you're making me late for work? No, they appeared to be all okay. But it was still crazy. Like, that's what happens when we get out of our lane in the real world, is there's actually these things called accidents. There's these things that happen, and they cause major damage, and they change the course of our day, our life. So there's some good phone action going on up here. That, or I thought we were flashed back to the pager days, and I didn't know what was happening. But good deal. No, that's totally cool. We're recovery. So if that's going to happen, this is the place to have it happen. Not a big deal. But that was a pretty gnarly car accident. Growing up, I remember, this is how I used to clean my room. Don't judge me. I had a messy room. I had a lot of things. And I'd have to clean my room every day. Or not every day. Once a week, I'd have to make sure it was clean. And I had a closet. Yeah, you know where it's going. And I'd open the door, and I would shove everything possible in that closet. And it was great when I was young. But when I got to junior high, there was so much stuff shoved in there, and then it wouldn't close. So I just rammed my shoulder. I'm a big guy, and I could ram my shoulder into it. Well, eventually I busted the door off the hinges. That wasn't good. But I was in denial of the fact that there was still stuff that needed to be cleaned and put in a right spot, in a right place, but I was living in denial about that thing. See, sometimes in this step, it helps us to organize our stuff so we know where they're at. Organize our hurts and our pains, because otherwise, we just, in the past, we used to try to clean around them, try to deal with stuff. Oh, that's not a big deal. We live in denial. We manage our life around those issues. We change our schedules. Well, I'm not going to go to Easter at their house this year because, well, so-and-so's there, right? So I'm going to go over here. And we use that as our excuses in how we do our social life and how we do our life and how we live. But the idea is that we're able to organize them, get our names dialed in, get the hurts that have happened to us, because they don't just go away. We have to go through all these steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're on 8, rounding the corner to 9 right now. And this is where we're at right now, is on steps 8 and 9. We have to go through all of them. You can't just jump from 4 to 9. That's not a good spot. In order for us to get our healing, because it's on steps 8 and 9, when we do the forgiveness and we make amends, this is where the miracle happens. There's story after story of people in this room that this is where the miracle happened for them. And so it's important that we do these things. By the way, I just got a notice that it said, no, it's 10 steps from Amazon. I don't know what happened to that, but it just popped up on my phone. I thought that was weird. They're listening to us. Maybe they'll get recovery. I don't know. But so I had to make a list, and you made a list of all the people that we've harmed and that have harmed us. And we did this in 4th step, right? So I already have that list. And it looks a little bit different. In your bulletin, you guys should have a flyer in there that has little squares and stuff. I saw it on my wife's chair. And it should be able to make a list, right? Pretty quick. So there's 3 types of amends. Let me get into this. 3 types of amends. The first one is a direct amends. Dave, where's Dave at? There he is. Hey, I am sorry for giving you such a hard time in the prayer room before we came out here. I apologize for that. See, that is a direct amends, and when we were talking, he goes, maybe you need to teach to yourself because you need to make amends. So I made amends, a direct amends to my buddy Dave. No, Dave and I are good friends, but sometimes we got to go directly to that person, and we have to deal directly with the issue at hand. It is a direct amends. So what's the indirect amends? Indirect amends, if you're in a relationship with somebody, and that is not a good thing to go back to that person and make amends, you have to do an indirect amends. So I don't go back, and I haven't gone back to any of my ex-girlfriends to make amends. My wife just said, thank you, right? Right? So I don't go back to that person because a lot of reasons, and here's what I hear so many times, unfortunately, in my office. Well, I was just looking up my ex-girlfriend on Facebook because I knew I needed to make amends, and then something else happens. Stop. Don't do it. Write the letter and then burn it. Indirect amends. Write the letter, burn it. Don't bring up old things. Don't reawaken the stuff that had already been put to bed. Don't get all that stuff going again. Indirect amends, boom. And then there's the living amends. What is the living amends? So this is, for me, how many times did I tell my wife, hey, I'm not going to look at pornography anymore? How many times has you as an addict told your wife or your husband, I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm not going to do drugs anymore. This is the last time. I'm done. Well, guess what? At some point, they stop believing that we're done because we're not done. Until we go through this process and we start to walk down that road, and now it's a living amends. In other words, I'm going to let my actions speak for themselves. I'm going to let the way that I'm living, the fact I'm not drinking anymore, the fact I'm not looking at pornography anymore, the fact I'm not doing these things anymore is going to speak for itself. The fact that you can start to see changes in my life because I'm applying the steps is huge, okay? So those are the three types of amends. Direct, indirect, living amends. So let's go through our acronym tonight. The A, admit the hurt and the harm. Admit the hurt and the harm. We have to admit that all those things. So when I was growing up, all the clothes that I put on the ground, I had to admit that they were there. I had to admit that my toys were. I had to admit that kind of stuff. I mean, I had it down to a science. I had not just a walkway from the door to my bed so I could get in my room during the week. It literally was stepping stones. I'd mark off where I could step so I wouldn't step on anything that would hurt my feet. And I'd be able to get into my bed at that time. But here's the thing. We have to start to acknowledge those things. We have to start to organize those things. See, my mom's process, when my mom and dad said, hey, we're going to help you clean your room, here's what that meant. We're taking everything from your room and we're going to put it in the hallway. Yeah. And then we're going to put it back in your room. Yeah. That was not a good process for me. And so that was rough. But we had to take it out of that and put it in the hallway and start to organize it. The dirty clothes, I had to put in the dirty clothes hamper and had to get washed. The clean stuff, fold it, put away, hang it on a hanger, do something with it. The toys that were left out, I'd have to put those things away. The junk, the trash, the whatever it is, I'd have to throw away those things. I'm still really bad throwing things away. I still have shirts from I think 20 years ago. Awesome. I know. Don't throw them away. They're well seasoned. It's like a good aged cheese. It's perfect. We've got to admit that hurt and that harm in our life. If we don't deal with them, we don't sort them out, it's going to hinder what God can do in our lives. And the hurt and pain and the things that have happened, if you don't admit them, which we've already done in step 1, we've stepped out of denial. If we don't admit those things, it's only going to hinder us. Luke chapter 6, verse 37 says this, do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. I find that a great verse. We got to admit that hurt and that harm that has happened to us. And the hurt and harm that you've caused other people. The M is this, make a list. All right, we've talked about the list. You got the list, make a list. We've done that in the 4th step and in the 8th step. We've already, last 2 weeks ago, we talked about forgiveness. Hopefully we have that list of those that we have to forgive, and we're working on it. Don't worry about how-tos yet. Don't worry about how am I going to do this. However am I going to go back to this person and say this? However am I going to go do this? Don't worry about that. But keep this process in mind and this verse out of Luke chapter 6, 31. Do to others as you would have them do to you. How many times have you hurt somebody and you just wish that they would forgive you? Or how many times has somebody hurt you and you just wish they would come back and apologize? There's a healing in that, and so we want to treat others how we want to be treated. And so we go through that process, and we make that list, and we start to treat people that way. The E is this, that we're going to encourage one another. How did I get encouragement beforehand? I didn't. I didn't get encouraged to deal with things properly. See, I would stuff it. I would stuff every hurt that happened to me, and I would justify every hurt that I did to somebody else. I would justify and excuse that behavior and said, well, they deserve it. Here's why they deserve it. And I was okay with it. I was okay. So before I would use, they call it eroticized rage. I would take that hurt, that pain, that anger, and I would use it to fuel my addiction. Some of you, that may be familiar to you. You'd get angry, you'd be ticked off, and you'd need to mellow out, and so therefore you go and you drink, and you do something else. Now, what do? I've got my accountability partners. I got my people that I go talk to. Monday mornings, I meet with my buddy John. Thursdays at lunch, I meet with my buddies Aaron and Lance. this is where I get encouragement, and they tell me, Scott, knock it off, go and do this, do it right. You're being an idiot. And that's so true. During this process, we also have to check our motives. I'm going to get into that in the next point, but we got to check our motives. What's our motives for going back and making amends? Is it just get off the hook? See, before, I would go apologize to my wife just to get off the hook. Hey, I'm so sorry. Whew, now she can't hold it against me. I apologized. Yeah. Wrong. I just got a bunch of dirty looks. No, that was my sick way of thinking. Come on, man, I've changed. But it's this process of going through that, knowing our motives. What are the motives behind that? When I was in Alaska and I got caught looking at pornography, and I was leaving the church, and I was stood before the elder board, I apologized for my behavior and what I was doing, and the response they gave me caused more hurt and pain in my life because I didn't have the right motives. I wanted to go back. I wanted to be the humble person. I wanted all this stuff, and I was expecting something in return. To this day, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was expecting something in return. And they said, Scott, I hope wherever you go, you're going to find healing. And I was ticked. I was mad. I was like, how dare you tell me that? And then I came here to Modesto, and I found recovery, and I was like, they knew something. That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. You guys hopefully have some accountability partners. Hopefully you guys have a sponsor. If you don't have a sponsor, you need to start looking for a sponsor in your open share group. You need to listen to somebody who has experience, strength, and hope, who's been through a step study and has a year clean time. You start asking those people, hey, could you be my sponsor? Hopefully somebody that you connect with, that when they share, you go, I want what they got, and then you go ask them. Not for the one guy that you think is the coolest guy in group or the gal that's the coolest gal in group, but you go ask somebody who you think you will connect with. Some people don't work for me. Other people do. I sponsor people. Some people I work well with. Some people, it's a struggle. But we have to start to think about how we start getting those accountability partners in our life to help us, push us through to make these amends. To make these amends, to make things right in our life. The end is this, not for them. This process is not for the other person. When I make amends to my wife, it is not for my wife. Do I feel the tension there that she's ticked off at me and angry in those rare occasions? The rare occasions? I feel it. I want that to be smoothed out. I want that to be flat, but I know that for me, it's a tough thing. And so it's not for my wife, it's for me. It's for me to deal with my side of the street. I need to stay in my lane. I need to not cross over those double yellow lines or that white line on the other side and hit a parked car. Right? Sometimes my experience is people who don't know how to do this step or that do it wrong, they end up pushing their stuff on the other person's side of the street. They end up going, hey, let me move this parked car across the double yellow for you. It causes problems. We throw our stuff in the other person's face. Don't put the hurt on their side. Deal with your own hurt. No excuses or justifications. Hey, I'm sorry that I hurt you, but I only did that because you did blah, 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 blah. Because what they did is obviously way more hurtful than what we ever did. And we sure do like to say, I'm sorry for this but. The word but negates the first thing that you just said. And that is difficult because there's obviously a conversation that needs to happen. And I've been in arguments before, and I've been in situations before where I know that there's a conversation that needs to happen, but before we can have that conversation, I need to make amends. And sometimes I just need to deal with my amends. I say my amends, And I end the conversation, we're done, and we come back and we revisit the other conversation that needs to happen later. But I leave my amends to my amends. Growing up, I was taught this. When I did something wrong, my mom would teach me to go back to that person and tell them, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And it seems simple, seems innocent, but it caused more resentment in my life as I grew up. One, I wasn't always ready to apologize. I was in the right, man. And other times, to ask for that forgiveness, that puts the other person in a weird spot. They may not be done dealing with it yet. Like small stuff, yeah, okay, whatever. But you're talking the big stuff that brings us in this room. You know, the affairs, the DUIs, the arrests, the pornography use, the constant betrayal, the constant hurt, the constant pain that happens over and over and over and over again that brings us in these rooms. That's not a, hey, I'm sorry for this behavior, will you forgive me moment. I'm going to go and I'm going to make my amends to my wife. Hey, I'm sorry for looking at pornography and lying to you and keeping this a secret. And I'm sorry for that behavior. That is hurtful and that is damaging. And I go through a whole different thing with that. And then I go, will you forgive me? Just kidding, I don't. I let it go. Because she may not be ready yet. I have to let her deal with her resentment and her hurt and her pain. I simply have to say, I'm sorry for this behavior. And then I walk away, and I've done my part. I cleaned up my side of the street, and now I got to let her deal with her side of the street. And hopefully there's a moment in time where she can come back, and she will say, hey, let's talk about this. But when we say, hey, when we ask them to forgive us, it puts the issue back on them, and it doesn't allow us to deal with our issue. When we go and we make these amends, we go humbly. We come to them and we talk to them. And we come humbly, not boastful or prideful or arrogant or joking, but it's a serious moment. And when we go, don't expect anything in return. No expectations. How many expectations? Zero, none. No expectations. Because when I have an expectation that of course they're gonna forgive me. The Bible says they gotta forgive me. Guess what? Then they're not ready to say, hey, I forgive you. Then I walk away and I'm ticked and I'm angry and I got a whole nother fourth step I gotta deal with. And I got more work I gotta do, more things I gotta write down, more conversations with my sponsor, more conversations with my accountability partner, more work. And so if I'm able to deal with my expectations, let go of those expectations, which is why I taught the lesson on forgiveness first, because I think that deals with a lot of the expectations. We're able to finally come before them, and we're able to make that well and have no expectations. And we don't expect anything in return. See, Luke 6:35 says this, but love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. I had a guy who was going through a divorce, and I remember he was really struggling with one situation that his wife wanted something from him, and he did not want to give it to her as they were going through this divorce. I remember going to this passage of scripture, and I remember saying, just give her whatever she wants. Be done with this. Stop fighting. Let her give this, and don't expect anything back. I remember when he got done and he did what he did, and he gave her the things that she wanted, the freedom that he had. And he was like, that was awesome. I don't know if he still remembers it, because it was a long time ago, but man, I remember that, and I was like, that is a great principle to live by. When we don't, and we go to those things with expectations, we come back with bitterness, and that bitterness starts to set root, and we have resentfulness, and resentment is our number one offender. And that brings forth 3 Ds. the D of depression, the D of despair, and the D of discouragement. When we feel like we're in this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, we feel depression come in, that despair comes in, and we sure do get discouraged. It's hard to see hope. It's hard to see that healing. So we got to do it right. The last one is this: do it at the right time. Do it at the right time. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1 says this: there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. Pray for guidance in this. Pray for guidance. Some of you out there, how many of you guys don't raise your hand, but some of you out there, I'll say it this way, are people that they have that burning desire and they have to act now. I'm ready to make amends. I got to go make amends now. It's 3 a.m. I don't care. I'm going to go knock on their door. Dude, may not be the best. I don't care. I have this burning desire. Some of us have these burning desires inside of us, and we let that control us. Others of us act more scared, and we're like, well, you know, it just says pray for the right time, and it's really not convenient and timeful right now. So, all right, let me give you some guidance. People that have the burning desire, journal about it, write about it, pray about it, talk to your sponsor about it. Figure out when that right time is. I had a guy I was sponsoring, and he wrote a letter to this person he needed to make amends to. And he kept it in his drawer for years. He saw her one day in, I think, Rayleigh's parking lot or Target parking lot or some parking lot at a grocery store. And he was able at that moment to make his amends. He didn't rush it. He wrote it. He knew it. He understood what he needed to say. And he just went and he did it. Boom. Beautiful. Others rush it. They may not be ready. There may be a reason why God's saying, you know what, don't do it right now. They may need to work a little bit on their forgiveness. They may not be in a spot to hear the fact that you're sorry yet. And that's okay. Others that are like, well, you know, it's not the right time. Let's light some fire under you a little bit and start getting you to move. And you may need to initiate relationship or conversation again with those people on some small level. You got to do it safe. Make sure you're talking to your sponsor and your accountability partner, but set a time and try to work towards that goal. Okay. Philippians 2 verse 4. Each of you should look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. That if we're going into this and we're not taking into consideration that they're going through another life situation or something else is going on, it will not be done well. So the question is, when is the right time? Don't wait until you feel like it, because you maybe never will feel like it. And don't be lazy in your recovery. Don't use it as an excuse to be inactive. Keep working your steps. Keep doing your stuff. The S is this: start living the promises of recovery. It's one of the things that we don't do in CR, but I know when you go to an outside meeting, they read the promises a lot. We would hold to the promises. And what are the promises that Scripture tells us? It says right there in Joel 2:25, I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. There's been marriages that have been in this room that have gone through a divorce, and then they get married again because of the healing that starts to happen and the repair of that relationship and what the locusts have eaten. There's marriages that are today healthier because of them going through the steps and doing the work properly. So start to live out those promises. Our relationship with our children that at one time were estranged because we were out drugging and using and doing the things that we were doing, we needed to find healing, and through recovery, we were able to do that and be able to have a relationship with our children once again. The stories of the women who go through redwoods and they end up getting their children back. The friendship that had been torn apart because of betrayal or lies or gossip or some hurt of some way can be rekindled again because of working our amends process. The jobs that we've lost because of our addiction. I don't want to raise hands how many people have lost a job because of it. But we can actually get our job back, we could get another job, we can get something that the Lord will replenish, and we can be honest at our job. The joy we start to get back in our heart, that's huge. The respect we get back. Oh, I heard a deep groan there. That's a good one, man. The respect we get back. We can still be humble and get respect. The intimacy we can get back in our marriage, not just physical intimacy, but the emotional, spiritual intimacy that comes with that. There's so many that are alone. We can start to get fellowship back and connection back from these rooms. But we got to use our phone list. We got to make those calls. You have to be purposeful in building relationships and connections with others. One last thing. When you're going through this amends process, don't use a lot of words. Don't make it confusing. I don't know if you know this about me. I'm a bullet point guy. If you send me a text that is longer than one sentence, probably not going to read it. I'm horrible at that. Oh, I still owe that one person a text back. Dang it. Sorry. I had a moment there. Here's the thing, is we have to keep it short and sweet. Be specific about what you did. Be specific about how that may have hurt them, and done. Done. Don't get into the stories why. Don't add the excuses, the justification, all the things that were going on in your personal life. Simply go, make it specific, done. I remember handing an amends to my sponsor, and he read it, and he goes, "This is horrible." And when somebody goes, "Scott, you've used too many words," that's awesome. So I went back, I shortened it up, made it short and sweet, to the point, and dealt with it, and done. Don't make it confusing. Don't make it a drama movie. Don't make it like Days of Our Lives. Keep it short, sweet, simple, to the point. Make sure you're going to them. Make sure you're going to be humble. Make sure you're authentic in the fact that you are sorry. If you're not sorry yet, don't go back to them. And say, "Hey, I'm sorry for this, and here's why." If you say just, "I'm sorry," guess what they're going to say? "Darn right, I know you're sorry." We have to say, "Hey, I'm sorry because of this," and why. And that's important. So I encourage you guys, do that. Make your amends. Do it well. Do it right. And the Lord will return what the locusts have eaten. So I want you guys to stand, and let's close with the Serenity Prayer. Focus question. What has been or is the hurdle to overcome when making your amends? Do you think God can overcome that hurdle? Yes, the last one is the easy peasy. We gave that one to you. All right, Serenity Prayer. Let's say this. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen.